to the Leading with Instinct podcast, where we dive deep into leadership, personal growth, and how the intuitive nature of horse herd dynamics can give you the tools that you need to lead with confidence and clarity. I'm Katie Navarra-Bradley.
And I'm Ginny Telego.
This is the Leading with Instinct podcast, focusing on intuitive leadership and fostering deep team connections through equine experiential leadership development and coaching. Brought to you by KatieTheCoach.com and the collaboration partners. Now, here's your hosts, Katie Navarra-Bradley and Ginny Telego.
Welcome back to the Leading with Instinct podcast. It's great to see you, Ginny. Since we last connected, you've been on a mad dash around the world.
Oh, well, it's great to see you, Katie. And yes, I have been on a whirlwind travel schedule over the past month. I was in 3 countries over the course of 24 days in October. So I was in Brazil, was in Spain, and then I was in the UK. So still kind of trying to figure out what time zone I'm in. But I was leading some engagements for Teaching Horse with executives, and I racked up a lot of frequent flyer miles, that's for sure. But you know, the clients I worked with, they had so many powerful learning experiences, and it just reminded me just how much I love doing this experiential leadership development with the horses. So I'm really appreciative and grateful for those opportunities to be working all over. But you know, it's good to be home for a while and be with my own horses. And I'm super excited for our conversation today, Katie.
I'm excited about our conversation too. While you were traveling, we were texting quite a bit back and forth, even though our time zones were all different. It was great to hear about your experiences there and to brainstorm some topics for today. And that's sort of what came to this idea that we have today about how we live in this world that's driven by speed. And we need to, as leaders, kind of take a step back and really assess what that does for us. And this whole topic really came out of an experience that I've been going through with my own horse, Leroy, who had been with a trainer for 11 months, and the scenario just wasn't working out for him. That program really prioritized speed over fundamentals, and I ended up with a highly anxious horse that, as a 2 and 3-year-old, he wasn't afraid of anything. I had him going through extreme obstacle courses with fire and sirens and flags and all sorts of things, and he didn't bat an eye. But when he came home from this trainer, he literally was jumping out of his skin at every noise and everything in his environment. So we went back to working with this old cowboy locally who has had this saying for years: you have to slow down to go fast, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did with Leroy. We went all the way back to the ground level with him. In horses, we went back to working in the round pen, no riding, really just to rebuild that relationship and the fundamentals. And as you and I were texting, we thought, gee, this is just perfect for all of our leaders who really feel pressured to act quickly, deliver that big ROI on tight deadlines. But really, the research and practice shows us that without intentional deceleration, all of that speed can create sloppy, misaligned, unsustainable outcomes, right? And really, this isn't a new idea at all. Even the military talks about this. They have this phrase called slow is smooth and smooth is fast. But when we live in this AI, high-speed tech world, it's really easy to skip past that slowdown to get to where we think we need to go.
Yeah, and you know, Katie, that's such a great example with your horse. And I think it speaks as well to just our thought processes on, you know, sometimes when people are struggling, when we have team members who maybe are struggling, some of it might be because some of the foundational things aren't there, right, for them to be able to do their job. So it kind of goes back to our conversations around setting clear expectations and making sure that your people are prepared. So we've had a previous episode where we talked about that, and I thought that really kind of plays into this because, you know, sometimes you need to slow down in order to make sure that all the pieces are in place. And I know when we decided we were going to have some conversation on this, we went out to do some research, right? Because we like to provide some data on the things we're talking about. And there is so much research out there about why slowing down to go fast is actually more effective than just powering ahead at full speed in every situation. And the reason is because going too fast at the wrong times can actually cause more errors and mistakes to happen, right? And then what do you have to do? Now you have to stop and go back. You have to go back and fix those things. So now you're slowing down your progress even more. And so by taking a pause to slow down, this actually allows us to have the opportunity to regroup and then prepare for a better long run outcome. And so one of the papers that we looked at was it was a title of it was called Slow Management, and it was in ScienceDirect.com. And a team of researchers published the paper about this, and has the idea of doing things more slowly, but with better thought, context, and craft over speed. And I just think that that's something that we've kind of lost a little bit, because we're so focused on everybody has to, get to the next thing, right? And in this paper, the authors note how quote unquote fast management is obsessed with change, right? And they want the change to happen really fast. And so there's this overhyping of speed as being more productive. And so, when we think about all of the disruption happening, and actually, some of it's disruption, but also some of it's progress with AI and the things that it's able to do and how it can help us to be more efficient and help us, kind of brainstorm and things like that. We use AI to help with our podcast to kind of put our thoughts together. And, we hear about the race, right? There's always this race to produce the next big thing, especially within the tech world. But, what if racing isn't the best pace to a solution? And instead, what if there's periodic pauses to assess where things are headed so that course corrections can be made? Because when we are just focused on this, get there as fast as possible, we miss so much. We miss possible threats that might be coming at us from some direction. We miss barriers that might be popping up somewhere. And so if we're not paying attention, if we're not slowing down a little bit just to pay attention, then I think that that's where we get into trouble. But, this idea of having to race and do things faster and just go, 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 for me, there's just this societal belief that slowing down means you're not being productive. And so, right? How often in our personal lives do we feel guilty for sitting down and taking a break from getting the next thing done right now? And I know we're going to talk a little bit, about the horses, but it's really kind of funny. I oftentimes have people, they're just watching horses out grazing, and moseying, right? Horses like to mosey from one place to the other. And people will say things, about like the horses being lazy. And I say, actually, they're being really productive right now because they're in a state of what we call relaxed readiness. So they're not using any more energy than is needed at the moment. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how this idea of slowing down to go fast can actually be more productive. But I love the fact that horses really set a great example for us on how we could be able to operate and stay healthy.
They really do. I have to admit, I get envious when I look out my office window and I can see them all taking a nap in the sun in the middle of the day.
Right.
When, we don't have time to, I'll admit, a lot of days I don't even get to eat lunch because there's the next thing to do on the list and rushing to the end of the day. Mm-hmm. It's also funny that you mentioned this because I listened to several podcasts about AI where the hosts are very pro-tech, very pro-AI, which is great. I think there are some good things it can do for us. But they're also very quick to point out the shortcomings to some of the points that you made. And on a recent episode, they were talking about measuring the accuracy in content creation for certain of the large language models like ChatGPT and others. And the accuracy rate was like below 5% for I shouldn't say accuracy, the quality rating.
Oh, right.
So, that's different than verifying your research, but the quality of what it was putting out was like less than 5%. And so it becomes this question of, to your point, what are we racing around for? The quality isn't up to our standards as leaders, as business owners, and what we want to say about our brand. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned that we do a lot of research for this podcast, and one of the articles that you pulled up that I found very interesting was by Peter Sankey, and it was titled "To Go Fast, Your Team Needs to Slow Down." And it made me pause, because it comes back to this whole theory of when speed becomes too excessive, the system will seek to compensate by slowing down. Perhaps that puts the organization's survival at risk in the process. But his point is that caution against the relentless pursuit of speed and growth without considering the broader systems at play can be really dangerous. And we really need to take that pause, that reflection, and align with our mission, our values, our people, to make sure that we're really acting with clarity. So we don't have to go back and redo things 52 times, right?
Because that's so productive.
Right, exactly. And I think horses can really help us see when we're in this panicked state. I guess maybe panicked isn't the right word, but this just speed track of trying to get things done, because they can sense our energy and pick up, and all of the sudden you'll see them walk faster, or you'll see them look at things that otherwise they would not even give a second glance at. And so, as we'll talk about later, really working with the horses, just out feeding them or having them in these workshops, really can teach us how to sense when we're stuck in this high speed mode and when we maybe need to shift to a lower gear.
Yeah, and I think that's just so powerful for us to think about, and it's hard. It's a hard concept for us as humans to think about the benefit of slowing down and seeing how it actually can help us to move more quickly towards where we need to go. And in a herd of horses, every member of the herd takes time to sense what's happening in the environment, discern how to respond, and then adjust their pace accordingly, right? And so what this means is they're using the amount of energy that is needed to respond to the current reality. And so I really wish that we could develop that. I mean, that's something I have continued to try and practice in learning that from the horses. When something is happening and I feel myself like, oh my gosh, I got to get this done right away. I know in my heart of hearts that if I don't pause for just a moment, whatever I am in a hurry to get done is going to go completely sideways. And so, it's like, okay, what would my horses do right now? And, what if we were able to slow down, tune into our environment, right? And then discern, how do I need to respond right now? And, in the sense of a project, or a strategy that we're trying to execute, what if we could look ahead enough, right? Not too much, but be thinking ahead enough to say, okay, when I feel like this train is starting to speed up and maybe the brakes might not be working, right? What do I need to do? I know when I was learning to drive a horse trailer, I had someone say to me, drive like you don't have brakes. And I was like, that is genius. And that has stayed with me for 40 years. Because really, right, it's like, how do you slow down to be prepared for what might be coming, so then you can just keep going instead of going really, really fast, slamming on the brakes, then having some kind of chaos happening because of that, and then you have to regroup. And so, when I think about this from the perspective of how horses operate and how their systems operate so much more smoothly than ours when the current environment changes, for me, it's really pretty genius, in all honesty, because why in the world would you want to expend more energy and resources than are necessary? I mean, to me, it's like, that's bad business, And so, how can we be more like the horses at regulating our energy so we can be prepared to respond to a real threat when it arises, or to an opportunity? When we're on this race, right, and we're in that kind of mode, what opportunities are we missing because we're going so fast and we're not seeing something over here that maybe is an opportunity for us for our business?
You know, when you were talking about your trailer driving lesson, it reminded me that as riders, especially in high-speed performance events, the thing that we always want to teach our horses to learn first is the word whoa. Because no matter how fast, how out of control things get, if the word whoa is so ingrained in them, it will stop and we can regroup and reset. Right. And as we talk about this, it makes me think, maybe in my own business, when I get caught up in that have to go right now decision making, just to say whoa and pause in that moment and let things settle, let the dust settle before we move on to whatever the next project might be or the next client interaction.
Yeah, I love that.
And when we think about all of these lessons that horses have to teach us, you know, you've mentioned this before. One of the things that horses really excel at is being present and scanning the horizon for what is out there. So how can we as leaders slow down long enough to scan our own system, to scan what's around us, to really have that pause and think about what needs to happen next before we move forward? Mm-hmm. You also mentioned energy calibration. I know when I'm around a horse and I'm all anxious and worked up, their energy matches mine. And I don't always want to go as fast as they do, right? And we see this with participants in our workshops. When they get 3 steps ahead of where they might need to be in the process, things start to go sideways. So how can we think about how horses mirror our energy as leaders to show that to the people around us too, so that they stay calm and in the moment?
And I'm wondering too, you know, we're so ingrained in some of these systems of you know, how we always need to be the first. We need to be the first, right, to market and with something. We want to be the first to come up with a new idea, and those are all good, and we do need to, right? We would never have progressed over, you know, the amount of time that humans have been on the earth without people looking to do that. And also thinking about, though, what are those times where we need to be looking at what's happening. And it's not that we're stopping progress, it's just that we're doing a check-in, you know. And it made me think about, so Katie, I was working with an IT team last year, and they spent a full day with me, with their team, doing an equine experiential leadership and team development program. And they had a plethora of insights and ahas throughout the day. And so I had my follow-up call with the senior leader of the team 2 months later, because I always do a follow-up call to kind of see, you know, what's continued to resonate for them since the experience. And he laughed and he said, you know, he goes, wow, it was such a powerful experience and we got so much out of it. And he goes, but I have to tell you, the thing that's really stayed with us was this idea that you said to stop your feet. And so for context, I tell my clients during our safety demonstration, you know, anybody at any point in time can call a timeout. Or if we see something happening that we feel like maybe things need to stop for a moment, you know, the facilitators will say, okay, everybody stop your feet. But the participants can also do that with their team. And it's an opportunity for them to kind of pause, right? Reflect on what's happening and decide how to move forward most effectively. And usually when we do it, it's because things are starting to get fast. And what we notice, and I love this, my colleague June Gunter of Teaching Horse, she has this great saying. She says, don't throw energy at confusion or chaos. And so, but that's our nature, right? When things start looking like they're coming apart, our nature is to like, okay, well, let's go faster, you know, and that really isn't productive. And so when we see that happening with the horses, and it's usually because whatever the team is trying to accomplish isn't going well. And so that's when people's anxiety starts to come up Everybody, it's kind of like every person for themselves instead of working collectively. And so now there's all this information and energy coming towards the horse, and the horse is like, I'm out of here. And so when we can say, okay, everybody just stop your feet, it stops everything. And the horses will stop very quickly once the people stop their feet. And so what this leader told me was that, from that experience with the horses, his team, when they're having these conversations around projects that they're working on, anybody on the team now can say, okay, let's stop our feet. And everybody else on the team knows what it means. And it's not meant to stop progress. It's meant to just say, okay, you know what? It feels like things are going a little too fast right now, and we're headed towards chaos. So how can we pause, take an inventory of what's happening, right? Because while there can be an urgency to move forward that's very valid, this team also understood that not stopping their feet periodically to reassess would end up slowing things down at some point, because they would have to go back and correct mistakes.
I love that example. As you were talking about that, it reminds me of a small animal hospital that I've worked with several times. We've done different team building experiences with the horses, and the very first one that they did, I'll never forget. They said their biggest aha was that they work really well together as a team when things are fast-paced, which makes sense. They're veterinarians. They have a lot of emergencies that come in. Yeah. But the minute things slow down, their team falls apart. And in an industry where burnout is really high, compassion fatigue, it was really interesting for them to really work through how they can take those moments of slowdowns to support one another, to regroup, to take that deep breath. So it's really interesting how horses can teach so many lessons about how speed interplays with us, at work and in projects and other aspects like that.
Yeah, and I think that's powerful. And some of that, I think, is, people who are in a field where they are really well trained to respond to things like the vet, like in a vet clinic. This is common in ERs, right? In emergency room providers. It's like, boom, somebody comes in. Okay, there's okay, let's assess. They go through all these things. What's happening? Boom, this is what we do. Boom, boom, boom. And then you're on to the next thing. But what happens when things aren't in that mode, and now instead of your brain going into this mode of just knowing what to do, what you're trained to do, now sometimes when things are slowed down, all of a sudden everybody's like, what do we do now? And their brains aren't used to that. And I think that makes people uncomfortable sometimes of being in that space. And so I thought maybe it would be good for us, because, this is important for our listeners. Katie and I always like to provide you with some practical things that you can do. Obviously, we strongly encourage people to come out with the horses, because that's a great way to learn how to go fast, or how to go slow to go fast. But, one of the things I was thinking about, Katie, in this is how helpful it can be, like, before you go into a conversation, especially a big meeting or where there's some decisions that need to be made, you can just stop for 5 minutes, just breathe, right? Just kind of take a moment and figure out, where are you? Like, what are you noticing in your body? Is your breathing shallow? Do you notice tension anywhere? And just take that 5 minutes. It seems like a long time, but it really isn't. And I know a lot of people out here that are listening are going to say, I don't have 5 minutes. And I hear that from clients all the time when we're, in our sessions with the horses, and I'll, suggest to them, listen, this only takes 5 or 10 minutes. And they look at me and they say, Ginny, I don't have 5 or 10 minutes. But what if you ask yourself, what if I don't take this 5 minutes? What is the potential cost at all kinds of levels if I just power ahead when I'm not in a good place to be able to make decisions or lead conversations. Because again, when you take that 5 minutes, there's a whole physiological thing that happens for us. But what it does is it allows us to become more aware. In horseback riding, there's this hard eyes and soft eyes concept when you're riding a horse, that when you have hard eyes, you're really hard focused here, but you don't see anything peripherally. And so we want to learn to have soft eyes where we're not so hyper focused. We can still be focused, but we're also able to be aware of what's happening all around us. What else, Katie? What are some other things that you think people can do to take this forward?
I think that pause is really important to focus on. You mentioned before heading into a big meeting, but also taking even a 5-minute pause during a sprint or during a session of really intense work, and just allowing folks to get up, get a glass of water, come back, and just reset. One of the things, though, I think that's also really important is to do an energy check-in. I recently had an opportunity to interview Dr. Terry Wu, who is a neuroscientist. And we were talking about the intersection of neuroscience and leadership, and how our brain and our hormones and all of these things contribute to stress, burnout, how we lead, how we can learn to lead better. And one of the things he said to me is that the easiest way to get rid of stress is to hand it off to someone else. And so we know that when our energy comes up, we get very stressed. And then when we pass it on to somebody else in our team, and that makes them very stressed. And so this concept of doing an energy check-in before a client call, before having that big meeting with a team, where is our energy at? The reality is there are going to be high pressure moments, right? We're all going to feel that anxiety of wanting to be perfect, to have the right words, but allowing ourselves to check ourselves and check our energy, even acknowledging it out loud. I know sometimes with some of my young horses, I physically have to take that deep breath and allow them to hear it so that we can kind of reset and get on, so that my energy doesn't create a fast pace in them either.
I think that's powerful. And just, I am such a neuroscience nerd. And so I'm all about neuroscience and leadership intersection. And I think there is a piece there, right? Of just looking at how can you really, at the end of the day, it's just about slowing down and changing the way we look at it, right? Some of this is a mindset change. Slowing down isn't inertia, and it's not lazy. You can use it very strategically. And again, I see this with the horses all the time, both within the herd and when people are working with the horses, that if people start to notice what's happening, and before things start to get out of control, people say, let's stop our feet, let's assess what's happening. That's where we can actually create speed, right? Because we can pause, we can sense what's happening, we can align, we can course correct however we need to create alignment on where we want to go. And then we can actually move more quickly and more efficiently to where we want to go. And I think coming back to this thing of, why instinctually horses are so good at this concept, like they don't have to listen to a podcast or go to a workshop for it. This idea of can you pause, just pause for a moment and notice what's happening with you, what's happening around you, what's happening in the broader environment. Then you can discern what leadership energy is needed in order to be able to respond, right? Everything doesn't have to be a crisis, and opportunities are going to be more real to you and more accessible when you can access them strategically. And you can't access things strategically when you're just on this fast pace. And the other thing is, again, with the horses, don't run if walking will create better results. I mean, like if walking is going to get you safely and efficiently where you need to go, and running is potentially going to cause you to run into the fence. And then that creates a whole lot of other things and barriers that get in the way. Then why not do it? And so I really think that just us creating some mind shifts around this are the key to starting the process to being able to implement it. What are your thoughts on that, Katie?
You made me laugh when you said that horses don't need podcasts and workshops to learn this, because they certainly don't. They want to use the amount of energy that they need at that moment. And, don't take that as, to our listeners, our horses have energy, and a lot of times they're bred to use that energy. For us, it's that energy to go chase a cow. And boy, can they turn it on when they know that it's time to do their job. But they also know how to come down off of that adrenaline rush and let their system relax and be in the moment. Because if you don't own horses, one thing is chronic stress is very expensive to correct in them. Their entire digestive system and body chemistry is designed for this relaxed state of being for the majority of their day. And so, we see that too, right? That chronic rushing can get us into our own health issues. Yes. So, as we wrap up, how can you think about where there might be places in your leadership that you're rushing through? Whether you take time to reflect on that in a journal, or you have a coach or an accountability buddy, what are some signals that you could sense within yourself that could be helpful to watch out for? I'll be vulnerable here. When we started this podcast, I said I was really anxious. Nothing to do with this podcast. We have something else going on in life. But I could feel my chest tightening. And so to me, that's a signal that I know it's time to take a deep breath and slow down to remember that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And the last thing that I think is really important to touch base on is, there was a study that came out of the University of South Florida that shows that leaders who jump too fast to make changes, whether that's to their systems or to their behaviors, they're often seen as less authentic leaders. And I know that we've talked a lot about the importance of authenticity to create a sense of teamwork and collaboration. So as we wrap up today, remember that when you slow down before speeding up, you're not just leading with instinct, you're leading for impact.
Yes, that's so powerful. Great words of wisdom, Katie. Thank you for that. So we just want to thank everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Leading with Instinct. We hope it's been something that resonates with you. We hope that you'll share it with someone who maybe could use a reminder to slow down in order to speed up, and that you'll remind yourself of that. We'd love to hear your stories if you've been out in the arena with the horses, or maybe you've had an experience where you realize that you probably should have slowed down instead of speeding up. And just be thinking about, how you might want to help yourself and help your system, your own body system, to be able to navigate through this fast pace that we're all living in. So as always, until next time, stay grounded, stay connected, and always lead with instinct.
This has been the Leading with Instinct podcast, focusing on intuitive leadership and fostering deep team connections through equine experiential leadership development and coaching. The Leading with Instinct podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Collaboration Partners, harnessing the collective human potential in organizations since 2009, providing equine experiential learning for lasting change. Get in touch at thecollaborationpartners.com, and by katiethecoach.com, helping entrepreneurs and business leaders reset, reconnect, and reframe to live their best professional and personal lives. Visit katiethecoach.com for more information. For more information about equine experiential development and coaching and the Leading with Instinct podcast, visit www.leadingwithinstinct.com. The Leading with Instinct podcast is available at leadingwithinstinct.com, on the Leading with Instinct YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Subscribe today, and thank you for listening to the Leading with Instinct podcast.